Super Mario 64 is a game that I've overlooked for the majority of my life. It doesn't help that I grew up with games like Super Mario Galaxy and Super Mario Sunshine, so my bias against Mario 64 was very, very strong. I could just never get into it. No matter what I tried, I could never get past the basement due to levels like Lethal Lava Land and Shifting Sandland. It was simply a game that never clicked with me no matter what I tried, and remained at the bottom of my 3D Mario tier list for the majority of my life. But all of that changed when Super Mario 3D All-Stars hit store shelves in September of 2020. I had never beaten Sunshine as a kid, and I was super eager to replay Mario Galaxy, one of my favorite games of all time. And Super Mario 64 was there as well. I refused to touch that game for a long while until well after I had beaten Sunshine and 100%ed Galaxy, until one day I decided to give the game a fair shot. And there's only one question left to answer. What did I think of the game? What do you think? As per every other time I tried the game, I could never get past the basement. Not even coming to the Switch could save this game for me. As much as I did want to love this game, there was absolutely nothing keeping me here. I could replay Mario Galaxy all day long and not get bored. Sunshine exists, but Super Mario 64 was the one Mario game I couldn't get behind. Until today. When starting this channel, I wanted to set a goal for myself to beat as many games as possible that I could never get into as a kid, to finally beat them and document my experience. I started this series with The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, and today we are doing the exact same thing with Super Mario 64, except there's a twist. I'm not only beating the game, but I am aiming to collect all 120 stars in the game, to make this experience as great as it can be. But without further ado, this is how I grew to love Super Mario 64, from my reluctant yet optimistic beginning to the eventual and tearful goodbye. When loading up the game for the first time, we are greeted to one of the most iconic beginnings of all time. No long-winded exposition, no long cutscene, just you and the castle. Screw that though, I knew how to control Mario, I knew what I was here to do, I wasted absolutely no time in starting my adventure. To be honest, I was very excited to start playing this game again, knowing I had to sit down and play it for the next few days. I never really buckled down like this beforehand, and I knew I wasn't gonna quit, so the thought of finally seeing this game through until the end made me very excited to start the game. I noticed very recently that I really don't care about the graphics like I used to anymore, and I honestly consider it to be character growth actually. Case in point, as recently, I had also decided to replay Ocarina of Time, and my biggest hurdle was the graphical differences because, well, as we all know, N64 graphics didn't, they didn't age very well, and you know what? Who cares? Something that I had learned while replaying Ocarina of Time is that everything about the game aged beautifully. The only thing being that the graphics suck compared to the games of today, and coming to the realization that helped me enjoy the game a lot more than I would have when I was still in the graphical mindset, and I think the same thing applies here to Mario 64 as well. For years, I've been used to games like Super Mario Odyssey and Galaxy. These games were the ideal Mario movesets for me, and it was simply what I grew up with. Odyssey especially was that pinnacle, but I must say, after playing 64 and finally giving it that proper chance, to actually get a feel for how this game controls feels absolutely sublime in almost every aspect. Even though this was one of the first 3D platformers ever, Nintendo still absolutely nailed the way Mario traverses in these areas. Miyamoto really must have been on some black magic while working on this game, as back in the 90s, there really wasn't anything to base Mario's movement on. In later titles, well, obviously there's references for everything out there, but in 3D gaming, this was still very new back in the 90s. This kind of technology was absolutely unheard of, and to craft to this day one of the finest movement systems in gaming is an absolute marvel. Of course, Mario can do everything you would expect him to. Run, jump, triple jump, wall jump, all that good stuff. But where the movement really shines is when you get to chain these moves together. The speedrunning community is absolutely mastering this, but that's where the majority of the fun lies. While Mario's base movement was nailed, I actually can't say the same thing for the wing cap. I mean, while I was completing the game, my biggest enemy was the red coin star while getting the wing cap. No level, and I mean no level, had actually gotten me pissed off in this game before or after. We'll get into that here in a bit, but the way the wing cap level was laid out and how you need to get around just simply pisses me off to no end. Controlling Mario in the air simply just doesn't feel good in the slightest, and honestly, It's one of the worst power-ups of all time, just in Mario in general. I don't know about all, in all time, maybe not, but in Mario, yeah, definitely like F tier, bad, don't like it. The only time that I thought it was fun to truck around with the wing cap was surprisingly the level everyone hates, being the second wing cap Castle Walls level. I think using the cannons actually makes the level work so much better than it would otherwise. When recording, I even turned on my microphone because this was the level everyone was telling me I was going to rage out on, and I got it in about 5 tries or so. Nope. We live! We ball. That wasn't bad! What? What?
It was.
That's not bad! Am I just good?
I don't know, you're pretty at the other stages.
I fucking guess. Damn, that's gonna go pretty high on my ranking. That was kind of fun. I really like this one. Translating Mario into 3D was obviously a difficult task, a pioneer in his genre set to do it all over again in the first 3D installment. But how do you make it fun? This is why the movement is such a key aspect of the game and how it led to my enjoyment being shot through the roof. This also creates some amazing replayability in the game, but we'll get to that in a bit. Movement simply is the key, and I think that's when the game really clicked for me because that's just how it's always been in Mario games, especially one of my favorites, Odyssey. The better you are at the game's movement, the better the game gets overall, at least in my opinion. Bob-omb Battlefield gets you used to these mechanics as there aren't too many crazy movement opportunities, but it gets you used to the basics. The game is going to teach you things without actually teaching you things. I made a video a long while ago explaining this very aspect and how great it is. It was for a video relating to Breath of the Wild's Great Plateau, but I see the invisible tutorial clear as day here. Each level on the floor teaches you something that you'll have to use later as the game progresses. Bob-omb Battlefield, well, nothing big, it's just getting you used to the controls. Everything is mostly safe here. There's no dangerous platforming either, nor are there any death pits. Whomp's Fortress is about positioning yourself, getting used to the camera, and fine-tuning Mario's movement to cross tighter gaps. Where Bob-omb Battlefield was wide and open, Whomp's Fortress is a lot more linear and narrow. You're expected to be able to jump and wahoo without falling to your death, and this is technically the first test of that. Jolly Roger Bay teaches you about the swimming in this game and how to properly traverse it. Aside from Bob-omb Battlefield, this one is probably one of the safest levels in the game, and you won't find yourself dying in it often, if ever, in this area. Sure, there are some things that can hurt you, but it's not that big of a deal. And finally, my favorite level on this floor, Cool Cool Mountain. This level is all about judging distance and verticality. You're gonna see a lot of linear, vertical levels later in the game, so you're gonna need to know how to go about such a level, and this one is it. Oh, and most importantly, sliding, as there's a few levels that utilize it. Each level brings something new to the table that you will need to know how to do later in the game without actually teaching you how to do it, and I just think that's a superb way about going about things. Although, with all of this praise I'm shouting, I regret to inform you that the movement isn't perfect, not in the slightest. There was definitely a huge learning curve with how Mario moves in this game, and it's probably the biggest reason I could never get into it as a kid. Of course, now that I'm in my adult years, I have a lot more of an understanding and appreciation for how Mario moves, but still doesn't mean that he's perfect. In particular, I had to be very careful with turning Mario around, especially on the obstacle course levels, because if you don't turn him correctly, he's going to do this very frustrating half circle thing, and if you're on a tight platform, well, you might as well just fall off and kill yourself now. There's a way to remedy this, however. It's, you just gotta flick it in the right direction. You kind of gotta get a feel of turning Mario around. It's really hard to explain, but as I progress through the game, it becomes much less of a problem, but I still don't like that it's here in the first place. The obstacle courses are some of my favorite levels in the game, so having this be my biggest and one of my only issues is not that big of a deal, I guess. Another thing is Mario's jump controls. I see a lot of people, my friends included, throwing slander on Mario's jump in this game, but honestly, I didn't really have any major issues with it. It feels like a far better version of the jump in the original Super Mario Bros. It's a jump that you need to lock in for. You don't have any real aerial control over Mario, so once you jump, you gotta be confident. And honestly, It's not that bad. You just have to be confident in where you go, and if you're confident, then you're fine. Although, easily the biggest thing most players struggle with in this game, and easily my biggest gripe with 64 to this day, is easily the camera. I think you all saw this coming. Everyone who has ever played Mario 64 can tell you that the camera is... yeah, it's bad, and you know what? I just can't defend it. The camera's just simply awful. The only thing I can really say is that Nintendo didn't have any reference in making the camera. It's pretty much the first of its kind, and if you look at it in that aspect, the camera's pretty good. I think the camera does a great job at guiding you and positioning itself at times to give you the best view possible. Now, of course, I do prefer the camera in the modern age, but back then, as a first, it's not that bad. Doesn't mean it's good by today. One of my least favorite stars in the game is the Pyramid Secret in Shifting Sandland, purely because of the camera. I wish I had my microphone on while recording this section because I was raging a ton on my first run here. Almost contemplated putting the game down and taking a break at the cost of poor footage organization, but I managed to buckle down and beat it. It just took me a long time. With this level, you pretty much need to know where the platforms are beforehand because the camera won't show you before you make that drop, and if you miss, which trust me, you will, it's a long climb back all the way back up to the top just to miss again. This level requires memorization of the platforms and a huge leap of faith, but this wouldn't be as bad if the camera just simply didn't work against you here. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. The camera in this game is like the Jelly Bean Challenge. It's very 50-50 on whether it's acting towards your benefit or towards your detriment. But otherwise, I think the game and almost everything in it has aged pretty well. One of the most important things when it comes to any game I play, whether it be games like Mario 64, The Legend of Zelda, Xenoblade, any and every good game needs to have a good structure, a great backbone, a very nice flow to how you progress in the game you're playing. What I mean is the game not only needs to feel good to play, but the rate in which you progress through the main game needs to feel good as well. If you're playing a game and feel like you're barely making any progress, that's a bad flow that you should probably avoid. For example, take Sonic Frontiers. I'm not the biggest fan of the structure and how it's handled. In this game, Sonic goes from island to island collecting things until you get the right amount of said things to continue in the game. Sometimes said thing is portal gear, memory tokens, emerald keys, whatever it may be, you're always collecting something. But that's the thing, you're just collecting something. And it's always the same thing every time. Sometimes you'll be collecting Amy's memory tokens just to unlock a very short cutscene that really doesn't do anything, just to go out and collect more of Amy's tokens. I don't like this. And don't even get me started on Uranos Island, the main finale area of the game. That's a video for another day. It's terrible. It gets so bad that you just need to grind the Big's Fishing minigame just so you can basically cheese the story so you can advance at a much faster rate, and that's not something that you should strive to do. I get Izuku was all like, yes, we want people to go out and make different paths for the game, but also the Big's Fishing minigame is really boring and I don't like it. Basically, the crux of what I'm talking about here is it breaks the pacing and it doesn't feel that fun to beat. I'm just gonna keep it a buck with you Sonic fans. You got another 7 out of 10 experience and you might as well accept your fate. However, somehow, a game that came out like 25 years before Sonic Frontiers, Mario 64 does not have that pacing problem at all. This may have one of the best flows in any game I have ever played. No matter what, you're always making progress in this game as you'll never really run out of things to do here. In the first floor, you have 4 areas you can explore with 7 stars in each area. Despite that though, you only need 8 stars to advance to another area where the game opens up a lot more with even more levels to explore. The stars themselves can range from long obstacle courses to just freeing a train shop. With 120 stars to collect and only needing around half of them to beat the game, you have a ton of freedom of where you get to go and what objectives you want to complete. Excluding all of the secret castle stars and Bowser stars, there is a total of 105 stars to collect from the 15 levels in this game. What that means is you can pretty much do whatever you want in this game and still find ways to progress. Don't like shifting Sandland? No problem, just go to Hazy Maze Cave and complete a few missions there. Tall Tall Mountain giving you trouble? No worries, you already have 100 stars, just go beat the game. The flow of the game is simply immaculate, as even though you fly back to the castle at the end of each star, you're able to fly right back in for another round or go play a different level. This was when the game truly clicked for me, as the absolute freedom of choice makes this game as memorable as it is. Ignore the fact that I have never once used that freedom and instead ran through every level one by one, but even in the levels themselves you have an immense amount of freedom, so you know what, I got the most out of it. Very little games nowadays, even from the main Mario himself, ever managed to capture that same freedom of choice that 64 had. Super Mario Odyssey is the closest we got, but still doesn't even come close, as you don't get to go to whatever level you want right off the bat. You get to go one at a time. Now this may be a blessing in disguise, as the levels in Mario Odyssey are far bigger than the ones in 64, but I think it would have felt so awesome for the game to open up like 64 after you leave the Cap Kingdom. Now, I'm not saying that linearity is bad, not at all, especially in Odyssey's case. This game almost benefits from being an open yet linear experience just so newer players don't get overwhelmed, but at the same time, I don't see an issue with that, as Breath of the Wild came out that same year. This is a game that absolutely revels in the freedom of choice and remains to this day as one of the best games of all time. Hopefully, in the next Mario game, however, they bring this sorely missed structure back, as I think having a different experience in every playthrough makes it all the more special. My playthrough isn't gonna be the same as yours, and that's something just truly special. But for now, Mario 64 will remain as the peak of Mario in terms of structure. Super Mario 64 made me tear up by the time I was finally done with it. This was a game I was not expecting to grab me this much, and by the time I was eventually done with it, I just wanted more. No Mario game since has ever come close to the mastery that Mario 64 achieved, and honestly, might beat out Mario Galaxy as my favorite Mario game. I still have a lot of debating with myself to do about that. My entire experience was the Danny DeVito gift. Like, I just get it now. Ever since, I just go back to this game on a whim to replay certain levels, or hell, the entire game. No game in recent memory has ever gotten me so eager to jump back in for another adventure, and is a game I will never forget. You did good, Mario 64. You really did good. But otherwise, that's gonna do it from me today. If you liked what you saw, make sure to hit my good friend subscribe over there. He really likes getting hit for some reason, so if you could just go down there and push his buttons for me, that would be much appreciated. Or hey, if you want to have a bigger discussion, I have a Discord server with my friend CK Matt down in the description below. But otherwise, that's it. I'm gonna see you all in the next video. Stay fresh, everybody.